Okay, well, good morning, ninth grade, and I hope that you guys are doing well on this Monday morning. We are going to be doing the second half of our lesson on 10.4, which is on special patterns. Okay, so last time on chapter or part one of this, we talked about this when we have a squared minus b squared and how that comes out to a plus b and a minus b. Now, today we're going to be talking about this when we have a squared plus 2ab plus b squared, that this time, look here, look, equals a plus b comma a plus b, or we could rewrite that as a plus b squared. Okay, so now we've changed it up. Instead of having a minus sign, we now have a plus and a middle term that is twice as big. So you see this right here, this 2 is twice as big, and it still has a and b in the middle term, and it's twice as big, and plus and plus. And we have that, it comes down to this right here that I'm underlining in green. It also equals this, but this is the better way to write that, okay? So plus and plus, and if you need to pause the video, go ahead. And then the final one here is when we have a squared minus 2ab plus b squared. Now the only difference here is that one of them is a positive, right? See this? The back one is a positive and the front one is a negative. And that equals, this right here, equals a minus b squared. Or if you write it out the long way, it's a minus b comma a minus b. Now again, you see this plus and this minus, and then you got the 2. So that's showing that it's squared. So if you see the 2 there, that's squared, ab, you think here there's 1, 2, right? Because you have 2 and 1, 2. Okay, so that's kind of introduction. Now let's see what that looks like when we get to a practical level. So I would turn with me to page 421, okay? And this is example 4, which is in your book. Okay, example 4. And example 4 says factor x squared plus 10x plus 25. Okay, now what I'm going to do is the same thing as I would have done before. I'm going to look at this last term and say, what's the square root of 25? Well, that's 5 and 5. What's the square root of x? Well, that's of x squared is x. But now, look at this. I have plus and plus, so I know I can just write plus and plus. That's my answer. So my answer then is x plus 5 squared. Okay, so not too bad to figure that out, right? I just take the square root of the first and the last, and I go for it. So let's try another one here. What if I had something look like this? A squared plus 8a plus 16. Okay, if I have something like that, again, I'm going to take the square root of the first term, and I'm going to write a and a. Then I'm going to take the square root of the second term and get 4 and 4. And then all I have to do is look at this term, and I get plus and plus. Okay, and so you see when this multiplies out, it's going to get a squared plus 4a plus 4a plus 16, and that simplified is going to equal that. So I write my final answer as a plus 4 squared. Okay, so that's really straightforward to do. Now, this is where it gets harder, is our next example. So same page on the textbook. This is example 5, and they say factor x squared, sorry, 12x squared, that's important, minus 36x plus 27. Now, one of the important things for us to realize about this one is that all of these numbers we need to factor first, and all of them have a greatest common factor of, you guessed it, 3. So I can pull 3 out of this first. So I do divide by 3. 12 divided by 3 is, oops, sorry, I don't know why I wrote the word 9, is 4. 36 divided by 3 is 12. And 27 divided by 3 is 9. Okay, so now I've rewritten that problem. Now I just leave this 3 here, and now I do my thing. I take the square root of the 4, the square root of the x squared, and the square root of the 9. So I come down here, I'm going to have 2x, that's that square root, and 2x. I take the square root of the 9, which is a 3 and a 3. Now this time, I see that's a positive, But that doesn't mean anything because this is a negative. And when that's a negative, I know that my answer is going to look like that. 2x minus 3, 2x minus 3, with this 3 in front, because this guy just stays. And now I rewrite my answer 3, comma 2x minus 3 squared. Okay? That is my final answer. So I must pull it out first. I must pull this 3 out first, and then I can take my square roots. Okay? So let's do another example. Let's do this one right here. 2x squared minus 28x plus 98. Well, I can see first of all that they're all even numbers. And because they're all even numbers, I know I can divide by 2. And I pull a 2 out, and I'm left with x squared minus, I divide by 2, and I get 14x plus, and I divide 98 by 2, and I get 49. Okay? So once I get 49 right there, now I do my step that I showed you on the last one. I take the square root of the first, square root of the last. So now I have 2, I have x and x. Square root of 49 is 7 and 7. Now all I do is look to this sign right here. It's negative, and so they're both negative. So my final answer now is 2x minus 7 squared. There's my final answer. Okay? Now let's do another one that has all positives. So let's do this one for good measure. We'll do a squared plus 12ac plus 36c squared. Now this one, I don't see anything in front. This is just a 1, so I can't take anything out. So I take the square root of a squared and the square root of 36c squared. Okay, I come down here, I have a and a, right? That's the square root of a squared is a. And I take the square root of 36 and I get 6. I take the square root of c squared and I get c. Now I look at this sign right here. What is it? It's positive. So I just drop it down to both of those. 6c. And now I rewrite my final answer just as one term, a plus 6c squared. And that is my final answer. Okay, let's do one more that has a little more of a challenge in it. And this is example on the back of the page. This is on page 422. And this is example 6. Okay, and it says x to the 6th, y to the 4th. Okay, x to the 6th, y to the 4th, minus 8x cubed y squared z plus 16z squared. Okay, now all I have to do in this one is the same thing. Even though it looks way harder, I just do the same thing. I take the square root of that, square root of that, square root of 16, square root of z. So I come down here and I write x cubed. Okay, I had x to the 6th, and I took the square root of x to the 6th, and that is x to the 3rd, because I just divide by 2. So when you are doing variables, you're going to divide those by 2. So x to the 3rd. Then I do y to the 4th, so I take the square root of y to the 4th, which is y squared, and I get y squared, like that. Now I come down and put that also here, x cubed y squared. Then I take the square root of 16, and that is 4 and 4, right? Pretty straightforward. And then I take the square root of z. And the square root of z squared is z, because I went from 2 of them, and I took it in half to get 1 of them. So z and z. And now I come here and I look at this sign, and it is a negative. So that means both of these are going to be negative signs. And that right there is my answer that I drop down and write as one problem, x cubed y squared minus 4z and all of that squared. And that is my final answer. Okay, so when you divide the exponents, right, if I have x to the 4th and I take the square root of that, that's x squared. Okay, it's always got to be an even number because I'm going to be dividing by 2 in order to do that. Okay, I'm going to do one more problem and then let you know what your homework is. So, another problem to do right here is 3x squared minus 72xy plus 432y squared. Okay, now the first thing that I need to do in this problem is to divide by this 3, right? I see that all of them have a 3 in them, and I know that they're all divisible by 3, so that's a very important thing for me to understand because I need to know that first. So I pull out a 3, and I'm left with x squared. Then I minus, and for that one, I have 24xy. Okay, then I have plus, and I take a, so I divide that by 3, and I get 24. Divide this by 3, and I get 100. And let's see what this is. I actually don't have my calculator on me, so I gotta do it the old-fashioned way here. 144. Cool. 144y squared. Okay, now at this point, what I'm going to do again is just take the square root of the first, the square root of that, and the square root of that. So the square root of the first is just x. The square root of the second is now 144. What's the square root of 144? Well, that's 12. And what's the square root of y squared? Just y. Now I look here to my sign, and it is a negative, so I just write negative and negative. So now I have to drop this 3 back down here, and then I write my final answer. Okay, I'm going to write it in green. So I have that 3, and then I have x minus 12y, and all of that squared. Okay, so this is my final answer. So here's the homework for today. The homework for today is page 422. This is 10.4, part 2. We're going to do 7 through 12 all. Then we're going to do 16 through 20 all. We're going to do 24 through 28 all. Okay, so it's not too bad of a lesson. I think you guys will be able to figure that out. So actually, I'm not even concerned. You know what? I'm just going to be nice. You don't have to do 7 through 12 all. I want you to know how to do these problems. So we're going to cut it down just to do these ones. Okay, so if you get confused, please look at grade link. But don't do 7 through 12 all. We're gonna save that for later. I may talk about that in another lesson, but really not that important for right now. Because I want you guys to be able to solve the perfect squares. Okay, so that's all for today. Mr. H is over and out.